Oh, just sit there. Good morning. Ooh, jeez. Sorry, that was a bit loud. I don't know if it was loud for you, but it's loud for me. Good morning, and thank you very much for coming to this little workshop on Google News. I really appreciate the fact that you probably had to get here through the rain. I'm based in London, so thank you for bringing the English weather to Perugia. My name's Madhav. I'm head of partnerships for Google News, and this is my colleague Laurence, and we'll be talking alternatively between us about a few Google News things. So, if we can bring up the presentation, please. That's how you spell our names. We're going to be talking about two basic areas. The first one is what the Americans call a kind of 101, or the basics about Google News. We'll talk a little bit about the origin of it, what it's there for, some numbers about it, and I'm deeply non-technical. Laurence is more technical, so she'll go into a little bit more detail about how it works and how, if you're a news publisher, what it can do for you if you choose. And then we'll talk about something else about Google tools for media and some other things that we show you that we think are quite interesting, and hopefully that will be interesting to you as well. So this here is a screenshot of one of the very first iterations of Google News. And I think it's important to tell you how Google News was created, because a lot of the times when I speak with people, they say, oh, this was Google's big vision about what to do with the news industry, and there was a big strategy meeting, and this is what you created. And it's none of those things. Google News was created by one Indian software engineer in his 20% time. This is the time they give Google engineers. 20% of their time they can do anything that they want. And he built this in his 20% time. And he built it for himself. And it all starts, as some of these stories do, on 9/11. The Indian software engineer, his name is Krishna Bharat, and Krishna was in New Orleans on 9/11, and they'd shut down the airport, so he couldn't get back to Mountain View, which was his base. And he turned on the television, and it was, a loop of horror. And he went to the internet, being an internet guy. He went to the internet and tried to find out what was going on. And once he got over the fact that pretty much everybody's website had crashed because there were so many people trying to do exactly the same thing, what he found was that it was very difficult to go from site to site. He is a self-confessed news junkie, and he wanted to know what was going on, and he wanted to hear different points of view on that. And he wanted to find out, not just what the Americans were saying, but what the English were saying, what the Indians were saying, what was the world saying about this. And that is where Google News came from. And he built it for himself because he thought it would be good for him as a news junkie, but also he thought it would be good for users and good for publishers. And the central point of why he created it still is the same today, which was it's really about sending audiences to publishers. Like I said, that's what it looked like back in 2001. Here's a little bit more of a screenshot. As you can see, it has developed somewhat, but it still stays true to its principles, which is that it is really just about trying to get people to go to other news sites. And I think that's the core message that I would like you to take across about Google News. I probably should give you some facts about Google News, so here are a couple of numbers. We have 72 editions, it's in 30 languages, and it is 13 years old, which for a Google product is really, really, really old. And therefore it's gone through a lot of iterations, but that principle stays the same. And that principle is summarized like this. It's a go-away site. That's what Google News is about. It's not about trying to keep people, it's about sending people. That's what Krishna founded it on, and that is the principle that we have today. Most publishers like to think about their own sites and they want people to go to it. We think completely the opposite. We want to send people away. And the senior director for product, Richard Gingras, who's actually giving a keynote later this afternoon, the only metric that he looks at for Google News is how many clicks out. That's what it's all about. So we're a data company, so I think I'm contractually obliged to give you some numbers. So it's a little early in the morning still, but let's just see if we can do a little audience interaction to make sure you're still awake, and I haven't put you to sleep yet. So 1 billion. Does anyone have any idea what this number means relative to news in Google? It's the number of unique users who see news results from some part of Google in any given week. 1 billion. Which I think is really a really great number, showing the health and interest that people have. Now, it's Google, so let's see if we can make that number 10x bigger. 10 billion. That's the number of monthly clicks sent to news sites from Google all over. Now a much smaller number, 65,000. That's the number of news sites that are in the Google News Index. And just a quick point about our index. The Google News Index is separate from the search index for a number of technical reasons. But if you created a news website today, you would apply to enter the Google News Index. And we get, hundreds, if not dozens, if not hundreds of applications constantly across all our editions for people wanting to be in the index. Because publishers have complete control when it comes to Google News.
How long does it take to get approved?
It varies. But we try to respond relatively quickly in a number of days. Is that fair to say? But again, it depends with the flow of things. If it's a slow, if it's a slow time and not many people have applied, then it'll be quicker. And now we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about Google News, and I'm going to pass over to my more interesting colleague, Laurence.
Hi, everyone. So let's have a look more at the product itself. And let me start with two important reminders. The first one is that there is no editor on Google News. The algorithm is doing the job. We have a robot that crawls the article, and the algorithm that ranks the articles. That's really how it works. And Madhav was saying that you have to apply to be in Google News, but you can also withdraw at any time. You can just contact our team, or you can use technical features such as your robots.txt file or a meta tag, just to say, Google News bot, I don't want you anymore. So that's just a few reminders. With this in mind, let's talk about ranking. I think a lot of people are quite interested in that. This is a rather complex slide, but the main message is fairly easy. You have two options when an article comes up. You can have a couple of articles in the local press, and then the story sort of disappears. That's what would qualify as a small story. And you have the other option, which is you have a lot of articles in the local press, then articles in national and even international press. You would have opinion pieces and follow-up articles. And that's what would be a big story for us. And that would generate what we call a cluster. So this is a cluster. This is from 2 days ago, when we had further revelation on what happened with the Malaysia Airlines flight. And the question you may have is, okay, the cluster is generated. There is a story, but now how do you differentiate the publishers, and how do you rank the different sources within the cluster? The algorithm really is looking at many signals, and one important one is freshness, because we tend to think that the most recent articles would have the latest on the event. That sounds quite obvious, so that's how it works really. But because the timestamp is not enough, if you just use a wire copy and put a fresh timestamp, it's not going to bring you to the top. That's not the idea. You have to bring some originality and some novelty. You have to add your value to the content. And when time goes by, the algorithm needs to find new elements around the story to change the top of the cluster. So that's how it works really. You have one story, one cluster, and it evolves as time passes. The last factor that is very important is obviously the reader. We want to think about the reader. So we take into account the location of the reader. If you're based in Germany, you'll see German sources. If you read in German, you'll see like sources in German, obviously. And then it's depending your interests as well. Because as a user, you can log in and then you can customize your Google News homepage. So you can create sections, you can remove sections, you can choose really the things that you are interested in, and you can as well adjust the frequency at which you want to see one source or the other. So it's very flexible, it's in the hand of the user as well, and the algorithm would adjust to that, adjust to all the preferences that have been set. Now let's see, now that we know how it works, let's see what the publisher can do and what kind of tools are available. The first one, the most important one really, is the Help Center. It sounds obvious, but it is very, very true, and there is nothing that we're saying today that is not on the Help Center. Sorry if it's a bit disappointing, but we have the Help Center. It's available in many languages. It's here in Italian. You can really use it from scratch. You can use it to submit your website. You can use it to troubleshoot any issues you have, and you can use it to get all the tips that you want to hear on how to get the most out of Google News. So do have a look. It's your main source of information, and if there is one thing you want to remember from today, please remember this one, because that's really the true source for you. And the good thing is that you have the Help Center, but if you still have further questions, you have two options. They're highlighted over there. You have the contact option. You can get in touch with someone from our team and get an answer, some help at least. And you have the forum. And the forum is very precious. It's a community of news publishers. They're all in the same situation. They just want to solve their issues, make the most out of Google News, and they're all asking their questions on this platform. So because they are all in the same situation, they're really the best person to answer as well. And the good thing is that you have this community that is living. You can vote for the best answers, so you get a hint on who is really knowledgeable about Google News or not. You tend to see who are the true product experts. And we do have Google staff monitoring it, so they can jump in as needed. One tool that is in the hand of the publisher is the sitemap. The Google News sitemap, that's important because you have the general sitemap, but you have the news sitemap as well. And that's a tool that is really fairly easy to use and very precious as well. And that's the place where you tell us the content that you want us to crawl. So we can take your articles from your website, but then we would look at everything. If you just want to submit your news, which is what you're supposed to do, submit news content for Google News, you can use the sitemap. And you put the link in there, we find it, we crawl it, and the extraction is a bit better because we use all the tags that you have in the sitemap, and it improves the extraction of, say, the title, the snippet, or anything that you want to show up properly on the news homepage. You can just be very precise about it within the sitemap. And the most important thing with the sitemap is that you would create it and then submit it in the Webmaster Tools. And when you go back to the Webmaster Tools, once the sitemap has been approved, you have access to the error reports. And the idea of the error reports is that you see the trends of all the errors that the crawler is facing when looking at your content. So that sounds a bit technical maybe. I'm not sure how technical everybody is today, but the idea is that we see the article and sometimes we would think, okay, this article is way too long, it's not the right content, we're not going to put it in the index. But that may be just only because we are crawling the user comments along with the article body. So obviously in the end it's way too long. So you can see that in the webmaster tools. You can see we have this error, article too long. You can go to the help center and you can fix that with just adding 1 or 2 tags to tell us don't crawl this part. So I can only encourage you to have a look, like submit a sitemap and have a look at these errors, because that's the one place you can see what's going on with your content versus the crawler. Another tool that is it's a feature more that is available for you. It's Editor Speaks. It's been launched in Italy 3 years ago, but it's rolling out in more and more countries because the experiences and the feedback is very positive around this feature. It's a good feature because it's good for the publisher. They can really display the content they want and they can pin it on the Google News homepage. So that's quite valuable. And it's very good for the user as well, because they can discover articles that maybe they wouldn't spot in the main part, because you do have a lot of articles in there. So you can just have a nice sample of your best content at what moment. So if we go a bit deeper into what Editor Speaks is, from the technique first, very easy. It's an RSS feed. There is nothing easier than an RSS feed, really. And the publisher updates it as they want. There is a minimum of frequency that we ask for the content to be displayed on the homepage, but that's quite normal. So we advise to update the feed once or twice a day. But then what you put in the feed, that's really in your hands. The first important one is the logo. So you have your brand right on top of Google News, which is good to either build your brand or just have it around if you're already famous. And then in the articles, the idea is that all these deep dives articles, all these articles where you invest a lot of resources, you do a very deep investigation, you don't want it to disappear after 10 minutes because someone has a new article on that story. You want it to stick around somehow. So you can put it in Editor Speaks and have it pinned on the news homepage, really. And another thing is rich media. So we're good somehow with the words, like finding the text articles, ranking them based on the words. But for rich media, we're not there yet, let's face it. So if you have infographics, videos, audio files, photo galleries even, you can as well link them in, and you can put it in the title. You can say video, this story, and this is very appealing for the user, and that's the opportunity for them to find it. So if you don't have Editor Speaks yet, create your RSS feed, send it through the Help Center, and it's going to be crawled within 1 or 2 days. And this is a quick list of all the countries that have been launched so far, and we're hoping to launch even more in the near future. And with that, I'll hand back to Madhav to broaden the scope of the media tools.
Thank you, Laurence. Oh, I should have said, we're hoping to have some time at the end for questions, but if you do have questions as we go through, please just raise your hand. Let's just do that. This is much more informal. So I want to talk a little bit about Google Tools for Media. I used to work at the BBC before I worked at Google, and one of the things I used to say to people I knew at Google when I was at the BBC was that I used to complain. And I used to say, well, Google doesn't really understand news publishers, and I don't think they understand particularly, European publishers. They always try to do things with the New York Times and the Washington Post. And I used to complain to them about those two factors, and they always used to say to me, well, you need to understand Google's an engineering company. And I always thought that was kind of bullshit, and that was kind of a bit of an excuse. And then they called me up and said, all those things you complain about, we're hiring somebody to try and help with that, so I'm trying. But what I discovered is that when I joined Google, Google really, really is an engineering company. And it's run by engineers. And engineers are a special breed of people, particularly Google engineers. They like to build things and just put them out there. And that's it. And see how they go. And whenever I talk with news organizations, they will say, well, that's really interesting, but can you give me a little bit more help? A little bit of context? And, and the engineers are like, No. You know, I don't think engineers like to talk to humans, and some of our engineers probably shouldn't talk to humans. So what sort of a little guerrilla group of people did within Google is they tried to look at some of all the things that Google does and look at it from a journalist point of view and what could be useful. And so this is where the Google Tools for Media group kind of came together. And very simply, what they did is they created a site, which is, there's the link there. It's in multiple languages now, in Italian as well, and I think 15 or so other languages. But what they did is they aggregated all the tools, platforms, things that they thought might be useful to journalists and news organizations, and put them in one place, and tried to explain it and give that little bit more of context to add, let's say, the human layer onto these fantastic engineering products. And that's what the Google Media Tools site is all about. And there's a very small team, and there's sort of good news and bad news here. So the good news is there is a team. It's very small. The bad news is they're based in New York, which means they don't get to Europe as much. The good news, again, is that they were actually here. So I don't know if any of you were here earlier in the week when Nick Whitaker gave one of his workshops on that. But we are trying to do much more in terms of outreach with this team. And Laurence is going to talk a little bit more in detail about that as well. But what we try to do is, when we are able to get the team over from the States, is we'll do something like this, where we'll come to Perugia and do a workshop with that. We do sometimes we do newsroom visits, we do things like that. But again, it's really adding that human layer to these fantastic engineering tools, and also making sure you don't have to interact with our engineers. And we've been doing this for a little while now. It's still early days. These are some of the organizations that we've done that with. But again, we're trying to do more and more of that, to really just explain these tools in better ways, rather than just be a bunch of engineers who go, here you go, you figure it out. So that's some of the things that we're trying to do. And the interesting thing is, in discussions with this team, who've been doing a lot more in the States, as I said, is they hit on a couple of sort of lessons or some observations that they have felt when they've had these discussions with newsrooms. And it's probably sort of completely obvious to all of you in the room, but one of the things is that digital storytelling, if I can use that kind of grandiose phrase, is on one level really, really exciting, and also terrifying at the same time, and also quite surprising. Just as a small aside, I was at Hacks and Hackers in London that we hosted, and I was hearing from the Guardian science journalist Alok Jha. And he, I don't know if you followed this story, but he went to Antarctica over last Christmas, and he was on one of the science ships that got frozen, and they got stuck, and they had to do a rescue. I didn't actually follow this story because I was in India off the grid, being very warm, so that was nice. And what he was saying is that he had planned this whole big thing. It got completely disrupted by the fact that they got frozen in, but it became an even bigger story. And he spent a lot of time doing videos and writing articles and all this kind of stuff, and really crafting stuff about the science and about the research they were doing in penguins. And yet the single most popular video that he did was a video that was just showing how difficult it was for them to send the videos. It was, them going out on the ship in a blizzard, getting the satellite dish up and running, doing it, and praying that they have enough signal to send it. And that was the most popular video, And he said, I've created all these beautiful other videos on this, and that's the one that people wanted to see. So I think what people are seeing is that the digital storytelling is opening up so much, and it's very surprising. You don't know what's going to be of interest. And so this is real areas where people can sort of be entrepreneurs within newsrooms themselves, and they don't need a whole lot of skills to do this. Most of the tools that are on the Google for Media Tools site or in other places, most of them honestly are either freely available, or they have APIs, or there may be pro levels to it, but the kind of price of entry to it is relatively low. And I think it's a really interesting time as people, can actually break new ground, do new things. I met just this morning at breakfast, I met the Good Morning Italia team, a bunch of very young journalists who are just launched, I believe, that they're launching their app today. And, they are creating something new, using the tools that are out there and doing it in a very digital native way. And I think that's fantastic. They're going forward with this. They're doing something new. They're trying it. And they're sort of not held back by lots of stuff. And I wish them all the best of luck of people innovating and experimenting in this space. So, personally, I am very enthused about this. I genuinely believe that the future of journalism is better than the past, and I'm very excited about where we're going. I do get that it's also very scary and challenging, but I do think that with experimentation and innovation, we will move forward. So forgive me, that was a bit of a personal rant. But with that, I will hand over to Laurence for a bit.
Yeah, Madame was saying that you do have tools that can help you, and you can be surprised about what people are interested in. So let's have a look at search and what you can do with it as a journalism publisher. The first part of search is something that is our core activity at Google already, like the search engine. And, well, it's not so bad. So it can really be leveraged. And if you want to save some time, you can use a lot of tools. I won't go through the entire list, and hopefully you guys would know already a few of them. But if you're curious, there is a link there. It's called Tips, Tricks. That's it. And you can learn about how to leverage your queries to make them specific enough that you get straight away exactly what you're looking for. So obviously you would use the words for what you're looking for, but you can use as well a few tricks such as search operators, like the site column. If you're looking for the Google News Help Center, say, and you want to make sure you get the right results straight away, obviously it should be ranked correctly, but you can specify it. You can say Google News Help, site, column, google.com. And there, obviously, you're going to get only the results from google.com, so you're going to see our help center. And same goes if you're looking for a specific story and you want only one government site and you want to search within that website, you can use that tool. So that's for the site search. If you're looking for a specific output, if you're looking for a file tab, you can use file tab, column, CSV or PDF, and then you get only this kind of results. So it's very interesting, and you can save a bit of time. If you're investigating on a specific period of time, you can use the time frame gadget. You can specify, I want the result from last year, from March the 8th till March the 15th, and there you go, you get only these results. So that's very interesting, and then that's for search, but for images as well, you do have a lot of tools. You can use a lot of filters. You can choose the color of the image you're looking for if you want to illustrate your story. You can use the size filter. You can specify what you're looking for. And there is even a filter to know if the images are allowed for commercial use or not. So it's just a few clicks, and then you go straight to what you're looking for without looking at the results, thinking, yeah, this is not, oh no, you can't use it. So if you use the filter, that's how it goes. So have a look at the list and see what can help you. The other side of search that can be used is Google Trends. That's fascinating, really. That's one platform, and you get numbers, infographics, heat maps on everything that people are looking for, everything that people are interested in at one moment or over a certain period of time. You can look at it for a lot of countries, and there is a new option that was launched just a couple of weeks ago, that is the newsletter. So you can just go, there is a link. You can go, you subscribe, and then you get either a weekly or a monthly newsletter for the countries that you chose, and you will see for that week what people have been looking at on Google. So in itself, you can look at it out of curiosity, but obviously you can look at it to see what people want to read about, what they are curious about at that moment. That's quite precious. And here is a quick example of what the Wall Street Journal did with Google Trends, talking about the Malaysia Airlines. So we've seen the last bits of that story just 2 days ago. But the Wall Street Journal, they looked at Google Trends, and they looked at, for Malaysia Airlines.
Oh, this was Google's big vision about what to do with the news industry, and there was a big strategy meeting, and this is what you created. And it's none of those things. Google News was created by one Indian software engineer in his 20% time. This is the time they give Google engineers, 20% of their time they can do anything that they want. And he built this in his 20% time. And he built it for himself. And it all starts, as some of these stories do, on 9/11. The Indian software engineer, his name is Krishna Bharat, and Krishna was in New Orleans on 9/11, and they'd shut down the airport so he couldn't get back to Mountain View, which was his base. And he turned on the television, and it was, a loop of horror. And he went to the internet, being an internet guy. He went to the internet and tried to find out what was going on. And once he got over the fact that pretty much everybody's website had crashed because there were so many people trying to do exactly the same thing, what he found was that it was very difficult to go from site to site. He is a self-confessed news junkie, and he wanted to know what was non-technical. Laurence is more technical, so she'll go into a little bit more detail about how it works and how, if you're a news publisher, what it can do for you if you choose. And then we'll talk about something else about Google tools for media and some other things that we show you that we think are quite interesting, and hopefully that will be interesting to you as well. So this here is a screenshot of one of the very first iterations of Google News. And I think it's important to tell you how Google News was created, because a lot of the times when I speak with people, they say, oh, just sit down. Go sit there. Good morning. Ooh, jeez. Sorry, that was a bit loud. I don't know if it's loud for you, but it's loud for me. Good morning. And thank you very much for coming to this little workshop on Google News. I really appreciate the fact that you probably had to get here through the rain. I'm based in London, so thank you for bringing the English weather to Perugia. My name's Madhav. I'm head of partnerships for Google News, and this is my colleague Laurence, and we'll be talking alternatively between us about a few Google News things. So, if we can bring up the presentation, please. That's how you spell our names. We're going to be talking about two basic areas. The first one is what the Americans call a kind of 101, or the basics about Google News. We'll talk a little bit about the origin of it, what it's there for, some numbers about it, and I'm deeply